So we're here on at the Monday night call. We have Aphroditi. Say your last name.
Lalaj.
Lalaj. And what is that nationality?
I'm Greek.
Greek. Okay. Were you born in Greece?
Yes, I was. I moved here when I was 10.
Okay. So in my neighborhood when I grew up, it was all Italians and all Greeks. And it was like the greatest neighborhood you could ever live in because every time you went to a friend's house, there was food. And
Oh,
Greek
wait.
food is good, Italian food is good. It's kind of probably why I'm fat now. But when I was a kid, I was like a stick, and everybody would feed me. They're like, you know, all the grandmoms, and every house, the grandmom lived at the house. I mean, you know how that goes. And
Oh,
then
wait.
I walk in, the grandmoms be like, dude, you're skinny. You need to eat. And they were the time to be like, munch, munch. And they would put all this food in front of me. And if you didn't eat, they would get offended. So I love Greek food and I love the Greek culture. It's great. So, all right. So Marisa, can you unmute yourself and kind of guide this a little bit? I think you're more qualified. Again, this is the first we've ever spoke, Aphrodite. I'm excited to hear you train, but I think Marisa can probably guide this to where you are the best and people get the most out of it. I did unmute her, I think.
Yes. How are you,
Oh,
Frank?
hey, how are you, honey?
Doing great, doing great. Thanks so much for having us on. Super excited. And Aphrodite, love being in business with you. And one thing I would ask you is, as you kind of went through your journey from the beginning to where you are now, it was always like you're trying to get to the next level. And, I respect that because when we're trying to get from, 10 families to 20 and 20 to 30 and so on and so forth, sometimes we can put mental blockers on that essentially just doesn't allow us to get to that next level, right? Now, you were the person that every time that things you went from that 10 to 15 families, you were like, how can I do 20? And you're like, how can I do 25? How can I do 40? And now right before this call, you're texting me and you're like, I don't believe I'm not at 60 this month, right? So I love how you kind of incrementally get better and better and better. And I think that that's really the key to this business. So Avril, talk to us a little bit about what that journey looked like of going from, no families to 10 to moving all the way now up to, 60 plus.
I feel like that's always been my thing. So I always text you complaining and, about going to the next level. I mean, when I was in the field in the very beginning, my goal was just to write 10 families. Like that was my main goal. Once I wrote 10, I remember someone told me in the office, if you're not writing 20K a month in the life insurance world, you're broke. And I was like, oh my God, I'm broke. I need to write 20. And then I remember last year, exactly this month was the first time I had ever hit 40 families. And I went on my first trip a year after being into the business. And yeah, that was like a huge accomplishment for me. But then when I came back, I remember that's when the cruise thing came on. And my next goal was to hit the cruise. The first one that came out, which I did. But it's always been like, I don't know. I feel like at the end of the day, you have to be in competition with yourself. If you just work on being 1% better than the day before, you can't fail. I mean, obviously, it's not always going to be like that. With you and I feel like we always talk about this. You just have to show up. Where most people fail is people don't show up or they just quit too early. Obviously, nothing is easy. I actually just had a friend text me yesterday. He was like, oh, I just got a new job. He was like, I've worked 50 hours my first week and it's an hour away. And he was like, this sucks. And I was like, okay. My response verbatim was, okay, well, if you were home and broke and depressed, that would also suck. So pick your suck. Nothing we do in life is going to be easy or simple. At the end of the day, it's all about your mentality, where you want to be. In the beginning, it's like you need to find your why. I remember in the beginning, I was kind of just like riding the wave, and I kept telling you, like, Afro, what is your real reason? I'll be like, I don't know. Like, I have my nephew, yeah, but I need a real reason. And I think it took me like 6 months to kind of figure out that the only person that I needed to like succeed for at the end of the day was myself. Because I am that main person that takes care of everyone in my family. And it's like, if I can't provide for everyone, if I can't be there for me, how can I be there for everybody else? So it's always about needing to strive more. So
I love that. And, throughout those times, and I think that any of us, like we all want to get better, right? Like Frank, you want to get better every day. I want to get better every day. Mike wants to get better every day, and so on. I think that that's what actually makes us really great in this business. Talk to us a little bit about going from in-home to telesales, how your lead flow changed and kind of how you dealt with that change in management.
Well, lead flow changed in the field because I was buying like 1 month old mailers, and everybody was dropping their campaigns, so I no longer had any lead flow. So I was I had no choice but to go into telesales. And like I said, like I personally hated dial days. Like being in the office, those were my rough days. Being in the field was cool. I love being in the field because I could door knock and be like, hey, if it was raining, oh my God, I would just wear no jacket. I would always be lit in the house. It was great. So I feel like mentally wise, because I feel like this entire business, first things first, it's mentality. I never really cared about dial days because it was like, all right, this person helping me out door knock. But once I was like, okay, this is all I have now, I have to figure it out. It changes everything. First things first, it's scary as heck. Second of all, it's like you need to buckle down because it's like now you're going to be doing something that you're not used to or like at all full time. Like this is what you have. So same way you figured out the field, same way it's time to figure this out. Present day, I kind of regret not doing telesales from the beginning. I would probably never go back in the field. No, not probably, I would never. I would get all my Snapchat notifications from a year ago when I was in the field, and I'm like, oh my God, this is what my life used to look like a year ago. And I was producing probably half of what I'm producing now. And it's like now I was just complaining to you about, hey, I haven't hit 60 yet. This is insane. I'm so disappointed. So it's like from a year ago, I've definitely at least doubled my production. And yet again, I feel like I'm just not doing well enough at all. So yeah.
What keeps you hungry? I mean, what are your goals? Because I think it's very easy in this industry to get complacent when you get to a level where you're making more money than in a month than most people make in a year. It's pretty simple to go, you know what, I've arrived. But if your goals are if your goals are lofty enough, you'll never get comfortable. And it sounds like you're never comfortable. How do you do that? And what are some of your goals that you're shooting for?
I feel like personally, I've always just never been satisfied. Like once I do well, what used to be my goal, then it's no longer good enough. I feel like I need to go to the next level. Personally, my goal in the beginning of the year, because I was shooting very, very low for myself, I just wanted to hit Hall of Fame. Like that was my main goal, and maybe to get a couple agents. I think my goal going forward is kind of recruiting more. That's definitely something that I don't share enough with people. So that's something we got to get better at. But I think what keeps me going is just, I mean, I don't know, I have my nephew, he's 13, but I raised him since he was like 4 months, and he watches me like a hawk every single day. And he'll literally text me at like 6 p.m. and be like, hey, how's your dial day going? If I be like, I've been closing, he's like, how about that guy that lied to you about your health? So it's like he's very involved. He always cares to know like what happens, how I'm doing. And I told him I had like a reply. He's like, how about like Netflix or Roku? He's like, you can make different advertisements. So it's like, if you have a 13-year-old kid kind of holding you accountable at that point, it's like, I have to do well. So.
I think that that's huge. And I know that you always show up, for yourself and for your family and, for your nephew for that matter. I know how much he means to you, but also you're a great example of someone that shows up for themselves and very rarely feels bad for themselves, right? Now talk to us a little bit about those days that you don't want to pick up the phone, right? Those days that you're sitting in the office, you're like, I really don't want to dial right now, dude. Like, how do you get through that mental block, or what are some things that you maybe implemented into your daily routine, so to say, that have helped you get through those days?
That's a very good question. That happens all the time. I feel like you can always be motivated, but motivation is not going to be there forever. It comes and goes. One thing is we always talk about is being disciplined and obviously consistency. Actually having a schedule and sticking to it. At the end of the day, it's like I can't, even if I have 4 appointments that day, I'm not going to take the day off and just not dial or just call those appointments. At the end of the day, it's like we have a campaign, we're paying for these leads. Even if I don't have leads, I will go back and dial a year-old lead. We always have this joke of somebody today has my money, and it's true because at the end of the day, these people really do need life insurance. And it's like, you could have given them a presentation 6 months ago and they've been looking this whole time, you run into the same person, that will be the person that will be like, okay, you know what, you show me a policy for $10,000 for 180, let's actually go up to 15 because I haven't even been able to get any coverage in the last 6 months. And that actually just happened to me the other day, and it was from someone I gave a presentation to in January. So it's like at the end of the day, it's you need to find your why. I mean, I just feel like if I'm not at work dialing, like what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be wasting my day and kind of, I feel like if you don't show up and don't do what you said you were going to do, you're going to feel worse about yourself rather than having a bad dial day. Even on the worst day, it's like, as long as you went through your actual activities, showed up, did your dials, counted them, tracked your numbers. Even if you don't write a policy on your worst day, it's like, you showed up, you were disciplined, you tracked everything. You still did what you said you were going to do.
Yeah, and that doing what you said you're going to do is huge. It goes a long way in this business. I know it has for me, probably for you too, right, Frankie?
Oh yeah.
And Afro, you're killing it predominantly with all final expense leads right now, telesales.
Yes.
Okay, why did you decide to go final expense?
I've never really tried anything else yet, to be honest. In the field, I started final expense, and when I did my veteran campaign, I just chose final expense.
I love it. And you persevered. Like you weren't like, oh, today was hard, so I'm gonna go with like IUL. Like, and by the way, I'm not saying that there's like just one good lead. Every lead is great for everybody, but for you, Aphrodite, particularly, you were like, I'm not gonna try to change the final expense, right? Like I'm not gonna go to mortgage protection if I had one bad day with my final expense leads, right? And I think sometimes our fault in this business can be we change things too quickly, right? Like we don't give it a shot, right? And with that being said, doing one type of lead is great, incorporating other things. But guys, we're talking to somebody right now who literally helps 60 plus families a month on final expense. So if you're sitting there feeling bad for yourself, like I work final expense and my premiums are $30 a month, it's like, well, Aphrodite, like, let's talk about it, right? So like, what are some of the things that you realized through telesales that maybe you thought were true that you have come to find out like they're not true? Like,
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Say that one more time. I apologize.
what were some of the things kind of like with that being said, like final expense, sometimes people will be like, oh, well, the premiums are going to be low or whatever it might be, right? Everyone has something negative to say about any type of lead, right? But what were some of the things that you've realized kind of in going into a final expense realm that maybe you thought this was the way it was, but now you're seeing this? Like your average policy used to be like, 500 AP, now it's about 1700. Do you think you're just building more value? Talk to us a little bit about that.
100%. So I feel like when I used to be in home, I used to go in with the mentality of, okay, these people are on disability. They're not going to be able to afford more than $40. So they told me they used to receive like $800 a month. I used to just kind of show them the lowest possible because I'd be like, all right, this is all these people can genuinely afford. At the end of the day, I came to realize that it's like, if people don't have money to pay for the funeral, that's when they need it the most. So if you find the why and you put the value enough in what the policy covers and what it's actually needed for and what it will do when the person actually does pass away and how it will cover their family. Because at the end of the day, like I just had to pay for cremation of my own family. That was like $5,000. We make incredible money here. And it's like, even for me, that was like, damn, $5,000 kind of sucked to like go out of my way and have to pay for cremation. Especially in that mentality when you're first losing someone, it sucks for anybody. So it's not more of like selling the person a policy. It's more of like just having them understand the value of what it actually does. Because you'd be surprised how many people are like, you know what, I would invest $130 a month to be able to cover my family since I cannot afford it.
Absolutely. And what are some of the identifying questions that you're making sure you're asking throughout your appointment so that, like you can even role play with me if it's easier for you, that you're making sure you ask to build that value. Like if you want to role play from, and also kind of while we're doing this, Afro, what are some of the ways that you get objections out of the way in the beginning? So if you want to will you role play your script with me? Frank,
Yeah,
you good with that?
Oh yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Are you going to be
I can be whoever you need me to be.
All right. Ring, ring.
Hello?
Hey, Marissa.
Hi.
Hi, Marissa. This is Aphrodite. I was just getting back to you here really quick in regards to the request that you submitted. It looks like for the veterans' final expense and life insurance options. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
You put here that you served in the Air Force. Is that correct?
Yes,
Beautiful. And your birthday as, I was going to say your birthday, but 1/1 of 1991. Is that correct?
correct.
Okay, beautiful. And you live here in Texas and you're happily married. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, beautiful. And now were you looking for final expense for yourself, for your spouse, or for both?
For myself.
Okay, beautiful. And who is going to be your beneficiary? What is your wife's name?
Mary.
Mary, beautiful. How long have you and Mary been married for?
Like 15 years.
That's beautiful. It's over a decade. You're doing something right. You're on the streak of figuring it out.
Oh yeah, one day at a time.
My job is super simple. I'm just going to figure out if the VA life or the private sector is the best option for you and your family. Now, Marissa, when you took the time to fill out this request, I'm assuming like most veterans, was your main concern, you just wanted to make sure that the funeral expenses are covered and they don't fall on Mary as a burden, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, were you looking to just cover the final expense or leave something behind as well if possible? What was your main concern?
Yeah, I want to cover the final expense. If I can leave something, that would be good too.
Okay, beautiful. And have you ever thought about if you want to be buried or cremated?
I would want to be buried.
Okay, and do you currently know how much burial costs?
I don't.
Okay, so burial typically is about $8,000 to $15,000, depending on the fanciness of it. Now, would Mrs. Mary be able to afford that out of pocket? God forbid anything were to happen to you.
No, that would be tough for her.
Okay. What is tough for you and your family?
I don't know how she would pay it. She wouldn't be able to.
So, what would that look like for her emotionally and financially, since you guys have been married for 15 years and she wouldn't be able to pay for the funeral?
She would have to ask some family members for help. I can only imagine what it would look like.
Okay, so the reason being you need a policy because you never got around to doing it before. And you know that emotionally Mary would be very hurt for not having you around since you guys been married for 15 years. And she would basically not be able to cover that out of pocket and she'd be in a very difficult position.
Right.
Okay, now I understand that you obviously may need life insurance a little bit more than most of my veterans because you don't have anything in place. With that being said, first things first, I spend a quick minute just going over your financial situation, just so I can make sure that everything's affordable and within the budget. From there, I spend a quick minute just going over some basic health questions, just to help me navigate what carriers we can go with. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, then I usually text them over my credentials, my state license and my ID. And then I just kind of jump into the health. But first things first is I dig into the why first. And usually the next thing I would ask them is, all right, is Miss Mary currently present home with you or is she out?
Yeah, she's right next to me. She's here.
Okay, beautiful. And I usually say hi to the other person. Reason I do that is because I don't want to go through an entire presentation and later for them to tell me that they need to speak to their spouse. So if she wasn't home, I usually would be like, okay, perfect. Now, is this something that you take care of on your own, or do you need Mrs. Mary to go over this information to be able to make a final decision today?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to Mary when she gets home. So
That's usually why I do that because I don't want to go through a whole presentation. If they're there together, I introduce myself. I get her very involved in the conversation. I make them put me on speaker. I usually say a few jokes about my picture and then I go on from there.
love it. Love it. So you're building value. You're having them essentially tell you why they need the insurance before you're showing any type of option.
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome. And then from there, do you pitch off of like a bronze, silver, gold? How do you pitch the plan to them?
Let me think. So I'm trying to go through my script in my head now. Okay. I usually go through the health and I usually say, okay, perfect. Obviously the only reason I ask all these questions, not to be invasive of your health. But obviously with life insurance, it's not as simple as going to like your local grocery store where you see something you like and you buy it. With this kind of thing, it's something you have to get qualified for it. You can't just purchase life insurance. So how I'm going to help you today is I type in all of your basic information here into my state system. This is going to generate what carriers I can or cannot go with, since it's going to do the shopping around for us, since we have all the carriers. And I usually throw that in. I've kind of just done that on my own lately, just because people are like, oh, I want to shop around. So just to kind of eliminate that later in the presentation, it's been working lately. Whoever comes back the cheapest, I'll go over your options. And then I start taking their information. So like first name, birthday, I go address. Then I say, okay, perfect. Spell Miss Mary's full legal name and what would be the address, the physical address for the policy. And then I usually just jump into the social before I give numbers personally. I know most people don't do that, but I personally don't give out any numbers unless they give me social.
Okay, so talk to us quickly a little bit about that, because I know folks will get stuck on the social and or the bank, almost explaining why you need that. So if I'm like, hey, well, why do you need my social? What are you saying back to me?
So I usually explain from the beginning. I'm like, all right, so first things first, it cares to look at what's called your Medical Information Bureau. Have you ever heard of that before? And they should be like, no. Just to sum it up, I know it sounds intense. It's basically just a prescription check over the last 5 years or so. From there, we're going to type all this in. It's going to generate what cares we can go out with based off your age and your health specifically. Whoever comes back the cheapest, I'll go over your options. And then I go straight into the first name, last name, date of birth, address, and I'd be like, okay, and for your MIB, what's your social? And they usually always just give it out.
Perfect. So you're making sure that you're being proactive in the beginning for these objections, not reactive, so to say at the end, to be like, well, this is why we need it and 28 reasons why, and then you sound really sketchy, right? So love it.
Beginning.
Love it. Love it. And then you also have a really good like one-liner in terms of when you're talking about whole life. You talk about it's not a matter of, you know, it paying, like you hit me with that.
So
it actually was really, it's like invaluable. If you guys are gonna take one thing from this call, like write down this one-liner. It's great.
I always say, so once I take their social, I'm like, okay, and just so we're on the same page, obviously, how much you know about life insurance, if anything at all? And they'll usually be like, oh, I know about life insurance. I'm like, all right, perfect. Do you know the difference between like accidental, term, and whole life? And they'll be like a little bit, and I'm like, all right, so first things first, you have accidental. You'll find out like your local bank or credit union, but it only pays out in case of an accidental death. So if you have anyone after this call, give you a call and say they can get you $300,000, it's not a real policy, okay? And then you have term. Term is usually good for 10, 20, or 30 years. It's kind of like car insurance, and then it expires. You don't usually get the money you put back into it. It's usually for younger people. Anything over the age of 50, you should have what's called a whole life policy. And then I'm like, all right, do you have a paper and a pen nearby? I'm going to have you jot down a few things in regards to what the plans come with. I always wait for them to grab a paper and a pen because I don't want them. This is where it's like the value of the policy comes in. And I have them write down 5 things. So like permanent coverage. It's not if it pays out, it's when it pays out. Cash value.
If it pays out, it's when it pays out. So like,
Yeah,
guys, that's huge when you're doing,
out.
that's huge when you're doing final expense. Like for them to understand, this is why, you know, well, somebody pitched me 300 grand for 20 bucks. Well, it's accidental, right? So it doesn't matter if it pays out, it's when it pays out. Go for it, Afro. Sorry.
Yeah, that's usually the main thing I say. It's permanent coverage. So it's not if it pays out, it's when it pays out. You're also building cash value. So any of the money you put into it, you don't lose like term. And then I tell them immediate coverage, living benefits, and tax-free. And then from there, I'm like, all right, I have a few, based on what we talked about, based on your age and your health, I have 3 different packages. On that paper, I'm going to have you write down gold, silver, and bronze. And if it's just a regular final expense for gold, I usually be like, all right, this is the maximum that we can apply for here in the state of whatever. Silver's typically what most veterans go with. I'll usually say covers the entire funeral expense and leaves a little bit behind for future inflation or any final bills. And bronze is going to be just your basic burial coverage. And they'll be like, all right, 30,000 with 60,000, 20, 40, 10, 20 most of the time. And then I'll just give them their options. And once I give them the prices, I kind of slow down and I usually say, okay, obviously nothing's guaranteed. But if I was able to get you qualified, which one of those 3 options would make the most sense for you that's sustainable and comfortable on a monthly basis? Because the most important policy is the one that's actually going to be there when you need it the most. And I just don't speak after that. Like if they don't speak back for 30 seconds, I'll stay quiet. I won't talk.
You have to on that closing question. And typically after when you're doing that, you know, out of 100 times that you do that, how many times they just pick one?
almost, and if they don't, I usually say, okay, so it's either two things. You either don't see the value of the policy or it's not affordable. So how about we go lower in coverage? Most of the time, honestly, I think the middle option is typical and most people go with, just subconsciously, just naturally, psychologically speaking. Yeah, and if they say they can't afford it or if they need to shop around, I'm like, all right, well, that's what the system just did for us. And obviously, even with your health conditions, I don't know if you'll qualify. So what we can do is we can submit an application for coverage, because we can go over rates all day. But if you don't have a policy in place, then nothing's going to change from today to tomorrow, respectfully. And sometimes I have to put them on blast. Like, you've waited this long, obviously nothing's going to change tomorrow or next week. So
Right, right. Like Afro, I had a guy, you know, I think it was yesterday, tell me like, well, I could just save $345 a month. And I was like, sir, like, all due respect, you know, you're 81, you haven't saved $343 any month.
mhm.
So it doesn't sound like, you know, we're setting ourselves up for success, you know, but like calling him out built the value, right? Like he understood, he brought him back to reality, brought him back to earth. So I love how, you know, you're like, hey, I call people out respectfully, right? So that's awesome. And somebody had asked, are you typically in dial rooms?
Oh yeah, always. I Zoom hop every day.
Zoom surfing. So yeah, you'll find Aphrodite in any and every dial
I
room in the best way. All right,
pop in,
perfect.
pop out.
And then outside of that, what are just anything else that you feel like, you know, anyone on this call could gain value from as it pertains to the business, as it pertains to work and leads, final expense, investing into themselves, whatever it might be?
I feel like first things first, people need to just kind of have it all packed down and ready to grind. I just feel like new agents, anyone who fails in the beginning, it's because they're not consistent enough. They tell themselves they've worked the leads they've dialed, but realistically, it's like if you haven't worked from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. like straight dialing and you just had a meal, don't tell me you've like worked. And I need someone to do that for like 2 weeks straight. And then they could be like, hey, listen, like this is not working. So just obviously being there for yourself because no one's gonna do this for us. Like I'm not gonna be able to sell a policy for you on your worst day. You know what I mean? Just being consistent and real with yourself. And kind of when you know you're lacking on something, acknowledge it on your own and work on fixing it. People have a hard time taking like being coachable or being criticized, but it's like that's what makes us better. And failing. Obviously, the rough days are the days that humble us because anyone could sit here and write 5 policies on a lucky day, 2 his and hers, and everything's peachy, but it's like, how do you take the difficult days where it's like you've been through 9 presentations and you haven't sold one yet? So yeah, just being consistent, knowing your reason, your why, and sticking to it.
I love it. And I love how just accountable you are to yourself and, you know, just to everybody around. You do what you say you're going to do every single time. So I love that. And I think that if I took one thing from this business, it's the same thing that you're taking. It's like you just have to show up and like you said, whether you go through a day and no one answers the phone, like if you know you were grinding, you know you were grinding. If you know you were grinding, you know you weren't grinding. The numbers are always going to pay, whether it's on the phone, it's in the field, whatever it is. I mean, they're going to pay you what the work that you did. So I love it. Outside of that, anything else, Frankie, you got?
Yeah, have you gone through those periods where you're just like, with all due respects, if I sold final expense all day, every day, I'd probably pull my hair out, which is that's everybody's different. And I'm not like, I'm all for it because I think final expense is the easiest insurance to sell and everybody's going to die and they need it. And you go on Facebook every day and find a GoFundMe page. But what do you do when you get through, when you go through those? Because everybody, you have to, right? There's got to be days where you get up, you're just like, I don't feel like doing this, or you get halfway through a day, you're like, screw this, I'm done. Like, what? How do you mentally deal with that? That
I listen
repetitious
to
stuff,
podcasts.
huh?
I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I feel like if I'm losing motivation throughout the day, I just kind of lean back on my support system. I feel like mentality and support is it's massive in this business. And in the beginning, I used to feel like I used to allow everybody kind of just to ruin my mentality. Like my mom used to text me mid-dial day of, oh, you need to give this person a ride or you need to take care of this. I feel like kind of just putting everyone aside and making a schedule for yourself. It's like because I feel like having other people getting in the way kind of makes that day harder. So if you're more peaceful, so kind of starting with boundaries and structure there. And then having a support system. Like on my worst days, I'll text Marissa and be like, hey, you got 5 minutes? And just kind of talk about like how much have you gone through presentations? How many dials have you made? At the end of the day, sometimes I feel like once you get to producing such a high number, you kind of forget to go back to the basics. So it's
Yeah.
like being humble, and it's like someone taking you back to like, hey, did you do the initial things? Like, did you work out in the morning? Did you, meditate? Did you do your to-do list before you start dialing? Simple things like that, I feel like changes everything. So kind of just like slowing down, taking a breather, and just going back to the very simple basic things.
Well, I love what you said about having boundaries, because it's very easy to fall into that trap.
Oh
When
yeah.
people know you're home, you don't have to report to a job because you're self-employed. They're like, can you do that? We had people who used to be like, hey, can you babysit our kids on like a Tuesday afternoon? I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, I have a job. They're like, no, you work for yourself. I'm like, yeah, and I want to stay working for myself. We're not watching kids. Or can you help me move on like a Thursday? Like, who the hell moves on a Thursday? Makes no sense. I was a good question I saw pop up. What's your lead spend weekly without fail?
Weekly. Ooh, right now I'm about 400 a day, times 7, so whatever that is.
And your schedule was, the next question was going to be, what is your schedule?
Whew, oh my God. Well, I'm usually in my office, like emails and kind of like, getting everything ready for the day for my system, things like that by like 8:30, 9 a.m. sharp for sure. And I'm usually dialing till most of the time, honestly, 7:30. Some days 8:39. If it's nice out and I'm dialing from, outside on the porch, I'll keep dialing. And I have different states. So if it gets too late for one state, I'll be like, California.
Yeah. And and you're 7 days a week? You're working 7 days a week?
No, I work on Monday through
Okay.
Saturday. And
Monday.
Saturdays I
Yeah.
take like half a day, yeah. But
Yeah.
Monday through Fridays, 9 a.m. to at least 7, like daily, runs and grinding. And Saturdays usually like 9:30 to like 2 or 3.
Do you have a specific daily goal you shoot for?
Yes. So my goal is I try to book at least 8 appointments a day, at least 8 to 10 to 12. And my goal is to go through at least 8 to 10 presentations every day. And if I don't get those presentations, I'll kind of mark, like we have a little box that we take notes on to see how many presentations we went through. And it's like, all right, if I went through 8 presentations today, like why have I only sold one policy? Because those numbers are kind of crazy. Technically speaking, if I give usually 6 presentations, I usually close like 3 people on average. But it's obviously not always like that.
For sure. But I like that the goal is more geared towards activity than the
Yeah.
result.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Well,
very true. For sure.
well, a lot of people make the mistake where they're like, I need to write 3 a day. No, you need to present 15 to get 3, because you're new and you suck. Like we all sucked, right? Or you need to do 21 presentations to get 3.
Yeah.
You're at 6 or 7, which is a testament. You've been doing it. You can't do it as much as you're doing it and not get good. But I think that's a big deal, because you're winning. If you're not focused on the absolute result, you're going, I just need to get presentations, the results will definitely come, right?
Oh,
You get
numbers game. So like if you go thoroughly through like 8, 9 presentations a day, if I write one policy today and give 8, 10 presentations tomorrow, I'm gonna close at least 3 or 4 tomorrow. So it's like on average wise, the numbers will always play out. It's always a numbers game. So as long
for
as the
sure.
activity's there, you can't fail.
Someone asked the question I want to answer. So like, and actually I'm going to ask you, if you call me and I'm like, I'm not interested, what do you do?
I usually say, okay, well, you obviously had an interest when you did fill out this request. So what was going through your mind when you did fill this out? And are you not interested because you don't think you qualify, or because you just think these will be too expensive for you? Either way, we can kind of work around that.
Okay, see, that's a really good response, because my answer is usually click next, right? I mean, it's like when you have a bunch of leads, you throw something, you lob up something, and if they bite on it, you're like, great. If they don't, I got 10 more appointments or 200 more leads to call. It's really not the end of the world. I think we get caught up in, how do I handle all these objections? There's like only a couple objections you ever get, right? And they're usually the same. And you say the
I
same
feel
thing,
like
right?
in home or over the phone, it's always the same set of the same objections. And it's like, if you just kind of have a way of overcoming them, there's only so many things people could say. I mean, there's always those people who are like, generally are just like playing games, whatever, but it's like, I feel like the people who have the most objections or the toughest on the phones in the beginning are usually like my most solid clients, like down the line. And they'll be the ones who will actually call me when they get their policy. Because most people are like, oh, I'll call you when I get the policy, never do. I feel like the most difficult people in the beginning are the ones who are actually like, hey, we got people for your referrals, and they'll actually call me like when they get the policy. They'll be like, hey, my payment hasn't came out. Did that get approved yet? So
And I love that because I think some people look at people that are rude or tough in the beginning as like they don't want to, they're assholes, but really they're just vetting you. They want to know that you're the one that they're going to allow to help their family. And when you pass that test, you're in. It's like they love you. And I agree. Jamie used to always say that she set a lot of appointments for me for a lot of years, and I call all the leads and I have zero patience. So if someone was stupid, I'd say something stupid back, hang up, and I'd write jerk on the lead or something a little more vulgar, and I would give them to her. And so she would read the leads and be like, this guy was an ass, don't call back. And she'd call him up and said he appointment. I'm like, seriously? She's like, yeah, you didn't pass the test. I'm like, I guess I didn't, but they were always our best clients. Let me see if we have any more questions. I like this. This is it's just not that complicated. It really isn't that
um,
complicated. Do you get referrals? That's a good question. You get referrals from the leads you close? If so, do you find that you close those as well?
yes, so we do get referrals. In the end, I usually say, all right, well, I usually make two jokes. So as long as they've been approved, I usually say, all right, Bob, it looks like I have good and bad news for you. Which ones do you want first? And they'll always say the bad news first. And I'm like, all right, the bad news is that you're stuck with me for the rest of your life till death do us part, literally, because I just did your life insurance. And I usually laugh and be like, hey, dark joke, right? You like it? And then I'll be like, the good news is that it does look like you've been approved. So they'll do the initial premium for, I usually, even if it's day one coverage, I always like to post date it for 2 days just because you never know what happens.
Yeah.
And I usually be like, all right, they'll do the initial premium on this day. I usually, if it's Aetna, I email them the policy packet right away. I'll be like, hey, check your email. They'll come through my personal email just so you have that. God forbid anything happens before the packet gets there for your wife. And I usually say, now, how does it feel taking care of this for Miss Mary today? And they usually, and I let them answer. I'm like, this is something that you've been looking forward to for a little while. I kind of let them vent on it for a minute just so they could kind of realize like how important and how good this feels. And then I usually say, okay, now obviously I know it's very difficult for people to just get approved and actually be able to find someone that they trust and that works hard for them. Now, since you obviously know you have me, I do have my civilian license. So if you do know anyone that is struggling or that does need help, just keep me in mind and always share my contact information. And they do sometimes.
Right? Pretty non-abrasive. Just lob it up again, see if they swing at it. I like that. Okay. Marisa, you have anything else? At 7:02. This is really good. I'm glad. Kali, thank you for reminding me to record this because that would have sucked because this is good. Marisa, anything else? She's good. She can't mute. Okay. Anything, last thing, do you have anything you want to add for folks that are climbing that hill that might not see the light at the end of the tunnel or see the peak of the mountain, but they just want to keep going? What's the biggest piece of advice you would give them to push through to where they can get over that hump and feel like they're going downhill now?
Purchase leads. First things first, you can't run a restaurant if you don't have food. So I always say you can't sell life insurance if you don't have leads. I just had someone reach out to me through Instagram and he was like, hey, what kind of leads are you running? And he was like, I do, he was like, warm market and people that I know. And I was like, how do you survive? I was like, how have you paid your bills? That's insane. That would never work for me. Me personally, I have people in my own family who have not purchased the policy for me. I don't know why. I think it's crazy, but yeah, leads is the main thing. Second of all, it's consistency. You actually need to work and dial the leads. It's easy to purchase, 100 ILC leads on with a discount on, with a cheap price and not dial them. I will put even the craziest, oldest, most trash leads that people would never dial into like Ringy and just sometimes dial them myself. If they have a good beneficiary, they have a few kids, I'm like, oh, this would be a good candidate. sometimes I'll shoot them a text. It's like at the end of the day, lead's the lead. You just have to work and being consistent, tonality, and actually sticking to a script. And I feel like even when I give new people a script, they skip around it because that's what's most comfortable for them. I would follow the script because it's like there's certain little lines and things of small objections that you could get rid of early on that new agents don't think is that important because they just kind of want to get to the beneficiary and things like that. That I feel like could kind of save them from like being able to sell a whole policy, which could in the beginning change your entire business because that could be your next investment to your next batch of leads. So small things like that.
Well, thank you so much, Aphrodite, for sharing with us
Of course.
tonight. If you could,
for having
Marissa, if you could put us on a group text, put Jamie in there as well, Mike in there as well. And if you could share your script with us, I'd love that.
But-
I mean, we have a ton of them, but I think yours is pretty, again, it's just non-abrasive, but it's direct. I think that's easy to read.
Yeah, I kind of took my in-home and a telesales script and I just kind of like dummy proofed it. And it's very short because I felt like every telesales script I was running into was just super long. I was like, why is my presentation taking me an hour and a half? Like, this is insane. Now, usually like 40, 42 minutes, it's like I have a whole presentation like A to Z done. In the last 2 minutes, I'm just like chit chat with my veterans, just kind of looping them in.
Love it.
So yeah, I'll definitely share that. I actually just kind of redid it a couple of days ago. I stayed up to like 1 a.m. because I don't have anything better to do when I have anxiety in the middle of the night, can't sleep. So I have a brand new one I can send you guys. So it's perfect.
Thank you so much. Again, Marissa, thank you for hopping on. Aphrodite, thank you for sharing.
Thanks for
Guys,
having
you're welcome. Thanks for joining. Thursday, noon Eastern, SRS liftoff call. Please share with your group. It's mind-boggling what I heard with the Vegas Ignite conference. How many people don't know about these calls that we do? And it's just sad because they're so powerful. And if you want to write, like Aphrodite, you write annuities?
I have never, no, not yet.
Okay. No,
That's
not yet. I like that.
It's actually written on my board in the back. Yeah, never have I ever written an annuity. That's my next goal. So hopefully in the next couple months, I could run into one of those and get one done.
If you just start asking the question, you'll find them. I promise you. And we have plenty of people here that can help you. And again, we do a call every Thursday at noon where y'all can learn how to find them, how to create an illustration, what product to write, how to pitch them, how to get them issued, and how to deposit on average $5,000 extra in your account once a week, once a month, once every other month. It's up to you. So again, guys, appreciate y'all for your time tonight. Let's make it a big week. Love y'all. Take care.